These people were corrupt. The whole thing was corrupt, and we caught them.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already.
Demoralization in the context of warfare, national security, and law enforcement, a process in psychological warfare with the objective to erode morale among enemy combatants and/or non-combatants that can encourage them to retreat, surrender, or defect rather than defeating them in combat.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures. The next stage is destabilization, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. The influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis.
It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely.
Causing allusions to the New World Order.
We have an army of digital soldiers. And so the American people decided to take over the idea of information.
When I came out a long time ago, I said, they've been spying on my campaign. I said they've been taping, and that was in quotes, meaning a modern-day version of taping. It's all the same thing, but a modern-day version. But they've been spying on my campaign. I told you that a long time ago. Turned out I was right. Let's see what happens to them now. What they did, what the Obama administration did, is unprecedented. It's never happened. Never happened. A thing like this has never happened before in the history of our country. And they went after him by going after fine people. And those fine people said, no, I'm not going to lie. I can't lie. He's not the only one. There are many of them.
The initial sentencing recommendation accuses me of aiding foreign interference in the American election. I was not charged with that. I am not found guilty of that, and there is no evidence of that.
January 20th, 2017, President Donald J. Trump is sworn in as the 45th President of the United States of America. January 24, 2017, the FBI sends two agents, Peter Strzok and Joe Pienka, to interview the new National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, about a phone call he had on December 29, 2016 with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. February 13, 2017, Flynn resigned for allegedly lying about speaking with the Russian ambassador about sanctions during the transition, although the FBI has since said they didn't think he lied. On March 2, 2017, because of his involvement in the Trump campaign, and after great pressure, Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from any investigations having to do with the Trump campaign and Russia, because he had attended a few events as a senator that Ambassador Kislyak had also attended. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein then took over the place of Attorney General Jeff Sessions in all things Russia. And from there on, the world would be taken on an emotional roller coaster, and a series of events and difficult truths would eventually come to light, known as RussiaGate, SpyGate, and eventually ObamaGate.
There was no there in August 2017. Do you agree with that general statement or not?
I agree with that general statement.
Thank you.
Now it came out that Mueller should have announced in the first week that we did nothing wrong. In other words, they had evidence in the first few days that there was no collusion with Russia. There was nothing to do with Russia. They knew that immediately. He didn't have to take 2 or 2.5 years.
The Steele dossier is named after MI6 officer Christopher Steele, who was paid $168,000 by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats for the smears to be used by the Obama Justice Department to perpetrate a fraud upon the FISA court, the media, and the American people. While originally using the dossier as evidence of collusion, Democrats eventually tried to deny and downplay this after it was found to be very unreliable and false. Originally put together as an opposition research by the Clinton campaign and Democrat Party, with significant backing and early work by Glenn Simpson, which was funneled to the Obama FBI and used to justify illegal surveillance on the 2016 Trump campaign, and later as a basis for the Mueller investigation. A FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. It's the United States federal law that establishes procedures for the physical and electronic surveillance and collection of foreign intelligence information between foreign powers and agents of foreign powers suspected of espionage or terrorism. And it goes 2 hops. On March 4, 2017, President Trump tweeted, "Terrible, just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." And the media lost their minds. And then about a half hour later, President Trump tweeted, "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon Watergate, bad or sick guy."
We now have new information showing that Obama himself used foreign intelligence to actually request surveillance on the 5th and 26th floor of Trump Tower. So to what extent was John Brennan behind that? To what extent can you share with us what you know?
Yeah, John Brennan, of all of the, I'll call them bad actors, because indeed they were, of the Obama administration, John Brennan probably has the most to answer, because it was John Brennan who sat before Congress and said the Steele dossier, paid for by Hillary Clinton, paid for by the DNC, that document played no part of the role in opening the Russia probe, when in fact we know it did, when in fact we know it was the impetus testified before a FISA court for its truthfulness to spy on the Trump campaign. So John Brennan, of all people, probably has more to answer. So too does Samantha Power and Susan Rice, and these individuals who admitted under oath that they in fact spoke to foreign leaders and representatives of foreign leaders during their transition, but yet somehow during during the Trump transition. That was uncalled for. What has been done all throughout history was uncalled for, and meriting unmasking and meriting cornering Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. All of these people have really legitimate questions to answer. I think we're slowly getting to the bottom of this, but it's a real travesty and really one of the biggest political scandals in modern history.
Well, for years after the 2016 election, former Obama CIA chief John Brennan was unambiguous. Interview after interview, he told us the Steele dossier played no role in the CIA's intelligence assessment of Russian interference in the 2016 election. Brennan, by the way, told Congress this under oath. Now the IG report indicates he was lying. Brennan's statements have attracted the interest of U.S. Attorney John Durham. John Kirikou is interested in what he said because he's a former CIA officer and a whistleblower who went to jail for doing less.
John Brennan was saying one thing on Capitol Hill and on MSNBC, where he's now a paid talking head, and saying another thing internally to his own people and Jim Comey, who was FBI director at the time. So we know that John Durham, the U.S. attorney for the state of Connecticut, who's doing this investigation, has now asked for and will receive call logs from John Brennan, emails from John Brennan during the time that he was the CIA director, as well as contemporaneous notes that Brennan took when he was meeting with these other leaders. We know that they lied to the FISA court. We know that they lied multiple times to the FISA court in order to renew the warrant against Carter Page. You know, I think that at that level, with everything being classified, and with their arrogance at the same time, I think that they think they can just get away with it.
You know, you see Roger Stone facing, in effect, life in prison.
That's right.
Over lying about much less. You see the whistleblower venerated as a Christ figure. You're like a legitimate whistleblower, and you went to jail. Mm-hmm. And you got to sort of wonder, like, actually, is this on the level? I'm sorry to say it.
From March 18th, 2019, newly unsealed court filings show how the late Senator John McCain, an associate, shared with the FBI and host of media outlets the unverified dossier that alleged the Russians had compromising information on now President Trump. McCain had denied being the source of BuzzFeed after it published the dossier, which was funded by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, but had acknowledged giving it to the FBI. Senior counterintelligence FBI agent Bill Presap confirmed that the FBI received a copy of the first 33 pages of the dossier in December 2016 from McCain. David Kramer, a former State Department official and McCain associate, said in a December 13, 2017 deposition that the dossier was given to him by author and former British spy Christopher Steele, which he then provided to multiple journalists at outlets including CNN, BuzzFeed, and The Washington Post.
On August 10th, as you can see from the IG report, by August 10th of 2016, the FBI, this is a footnote in the IG's report about the Crossfire Hurricane case. Remember, the FBI says they didn't get the dossier till September. But by August 10th, the FBI had assembled an investigative team and was conducting an initial analysis of links between the Trump campaign members and Russia. How is that, Joe? The only place this allegation exists is in the dossier, which they say they don't have till September. The footnote goes on. Based on this analysis on August 10th, the FBI opened individual cases under Crossfire Hurricane's umbrella on 3 persons, Papadopoulos, Carter Page, and Manafort. On August 16th, 6 days later, they opened up a case on a 4th individual, Mike Flynn. The Trump-Russia stuff in that footnote on the IG report, the FBI says it's investigating on August 10th. And the Mike Flynn Russia connections are all fairy tales. They're fake. They're Aesop's fables. They're hoaxes. And they exist only in one place. In the mind of Hillary Clinton's paid Fusion GPS Christopher Steele dossier operatives. Those charges are false. So if they only exist in the dossier, which the FBI is saying it didn't get till September, but they're opening up a case on August 10th based on the charges in the dossier and nowhere else, then somebody's lying, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is a dossier from Steele, and it's alleging that Mike Flynn is engaging with the Kremlin with others. But it's interesting because Mike Flynn's name is put in parentheses, and it's the only name in the entire report that's not in all caps, almost as if it was added later, like somebody needed something. Almost like on August 10th, they wanted to open up a case against Mike Flynn because he was about to expose the swamp. So they open up a case on 3 others to distract people. Hey, open up on these 3 first, and we'll open up on Flynn 6 days later on August 16th, so it'll make it look like this isn't all about Flynn. What's the date on that dossier when they got this dossier? That, remember, the FBI is saying they got in September. Oh, August 10th, 2016.
Top DOJ official Bruce Orr was demoted for having contacts with Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS. House investigators have determined that Orr met shortly after the election with Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm that hired Steele to compile the dossier with funds supplied by the Hillary Clinton campaign and DNC. By that point, according to the published reports, the dossier had been in the hands of the FBI for some 5 months, and the surveillance on Carter Page, an advisor to the Trump campaign, had started more than 2 months prior. And I bet you didn't know that Nellie Orr, married to Bruce Orr, worked for Fusion GPS, and she worked on the dossier with Christopher Steele. They all know each other. And of course, Bruce never reported the conflict of interest.
And it's a disgrace. The Obama administration, Justice Department, was a disgrace. And they got caught. They got caught. Very dishonest people. But much more than this, it's treason. It's treason.
FBI officials withheld negative information about Christopher Steele because of an agreement with the Brits. Bill Priestap, the FBI's former chief of counterintelligence, told Justice Department investigators he agreed not to disclose information he learned about Christopher Steele as a precondition for a meeting with British government officials regarding the former MI6 officer, according to recent declassified information. Bill Priestap and his deputy, Peter Strzok, traveled to the United Kingdom in November and December of 2016 to assess the reliability of Steele. Priestap and Strzok embarked on the fact-finding mission weeks after the FBI had already used Steele's anti-Trump dossier to obtain Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, order against Carter Page. They shared the assessment with the FBI team conducting the Trump probe, but did not include the information in Steele's so-called Delta file, which the FBI maintains for its confidential sources. Because the information was not in Steele's file, it was not used to assess Steele's validity as an FBI source for the Trump investigation. The FBI also did not share the information in 3 additional applications for FISA orders against Page. Priestap was asked during an interview with the IG why the negative Steele information was not included in his file or disclosed to the FISA court. He said that he may have made a commitment to Steele's former employer not to document the former employer's views on Steele as a condition for obtaining the information on the retired spy. The IG report provides a damning assessment of Steele's dossier. But of course, the media downplayed it all. According to footnotes from the report released April 10th, the FBI received evidence in early 2017 that Russian intelligence operatives might have fed disinformation to Steele that ended up in the dossier. Yeah, you heard that right. Russian disinformation. Footnotes declassified said that U.S. intelligence community produced a report in June 2017 that said 2 Russian intelligence operatives knew in early July 2016 that Steele was investigating Trump. The Kremlin's awareness of Steele's activities might have made him a vulnerable target for possible disinformation campaign.
In January 2017 and in March 2017, they talked to the primary subsource, who was the sole conduit for this information that made up the dossier. And as I've said, the dossier pretty much collapsed at that point, and yet they continued to use it as a basis for pursuing this counterintelligence investigation.
Christopher Steele has been ordered to pay Alpha Bank partners for publishing inaccurate or misleading material in his infamous dossier, including claims the bank funneled illicit cash to Russian President Vladimir Putin. A British court ruled on July 8th, 2020. Christopher Steele's company, Orbis Business Intelligence, was ordered to pay 18,000 English pounds, or nearly 23,000 each, to two banks that I probably can't pronounce, for violating Britain's Data Protection Act of 1998. Normally, politicians are warned in a defense briefing by the intelligence community if they've unknowingly come into contact with someone who possesses a threat to them, but Trump was never given a defense briefing. So why? Was it planned? When Paul Manafort was convicted, he went into jail and he was in solitary confinement, and it was a big drama. I kept thinking how weird it was to put an old man in solitary confinement over financial crimes. He was never convicted for anything that had to do with collusion with Russians. Was he really in solitary confinement? How would you hide that a prisoner wasn't really there? And now he's been let out for coronavirus. Convenient. And Carter Page, he fought the law and he won without a lawyer. Were they planted? Carter Page never played a major role in the Trump team, and he was never charged with a crime by Robert Mueller. Why? Well, he wasn't a Russian spy, and it's been said that he was actually an FBI asset.
You signed a warrant application in June of, I think, 2017 to get the Carter Page warrant renewed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked at the Horowitz report?
Yes, I have. I have it with me, Senator.
If you knew then what you know now, would you have signed the warrant application?
No, I would not.
And the reason you wouldn't have is because Mr. Horowitz found that exculpatory information was withheld from the court. Is that correct?
Among other reasons, yes.
Yeah, and somebody actually altered an email.
Correct.
Right. So there were 17 violations that Mr. Horowitz found, but I can't stress enough to the country that he found the most egregious of all. The dossier was the only reason the Carter Page warrant was issued to begin with. And in January 2017, the man who provided Steele with all the information told the FBI it was a bunch of garbage and they used it twice more. What kind of country is this? What happens to people who do that? Did you know that? You didn't know that, did you?
No, sir.
Do you think McCabe knew that?
I hope not.
In May 2017, President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey. The left and the media lost their friggin' minds. It was Nixon all over again, and clear obstruction of justice, according to the official narrative.
In particular, Senator, with regard to Mr. Comey's memoranda of his interviews with the president and with regard to the FBI's suspicions about the president, Mr. McCabe did not reveal those to me for at least a week after he became acting director, despite the fact that we had repeated conversations focusing on this investigation. And for whatever reasons, Mr. McCabe was not forthcoming with me about that.
Andrew McCabe took over as acting director of the FBI. Comey leaked a series of memos to an associate that then leaked them to the press. He admitted to Congress that he did it in order to spark a special counsel investigation, aka the Mueller Probe. But we now know there was never any real basis for Mueller to be investigating Trump or his campaign.
See, they break you financially, they gag you so you can't defend yourself, and all for one specific purpose. On July 24th of 2019, one of the prosecutors approached my lawyers and proposed essentially a deal. If your client would be willing to come clean, if your client would be prepared to confess that these 29 phone calls between himself and candidate Donald Trump in 2016 were about WikiLeaks and the Russians, we might be willing to recommend no jail time.
If you come along and say the President of the United States is even in any way connected to all of this, then that's how Roger Stone goes free.
That's exactly right. Now, their purpose was very clear. This was days before the Mueller report. So they knew that their Russian section of the Mueller report was a dud, that they had nothing. So they wanted me to be the ham in their ham sandwich. And I declined because it's not true.
laboratories, because this was a very important element, which is ultimately what have the prosecutions been on Paul Manafort for a bunch of very sketchy and illegal things that he did before working for Donald Trump, his associate, Mr. Gates, Roger Stone, and Michael Flynn. And all of these have essentially come down to, in Stone and Flynn's case, we're talking about process crimes of lying to the FBI in the course of their investigation. And now we know that the FBI was basically trying to bait them into doing that in the first place.
Yeah, Papadopoulos, I would add to that.
Oh, right, Papadopoulos.
Right, where, again, and the crime in that instance was, he was off by a week in his recollection of when he started working for the Trump campaign.
George Papadopoulos told the FBI informer that the Trump campaign wasn't involved in the DNC hack, and they withheld it on multiple FISA applications. Sometimes with salty language, Papadopoulos repeatedly denied in the transcript any involvement by the Trump campaign in the DNC email hack or Russian election rigging. The confidential human source said, "You think anyone from the Trump campaign had anything to do with effing over at the DNC?" Papadopoulos said, "No." The CHS said, "Really?" And PDOP says, "No, I know that for a fact." Later in the transcript, Papadopoulos said that he told a more senior political player that the Trump campaign had nothing to do with the DNC hack. "It's illegal, to do that shit," Papadopoulos said to the FBI confidential source. In his December 2019 report, Inspector General Michael Horowitz criticized the FBI for failing to include evidence that could undermine its FISA warrant applications, but he also noted that the FBI had discounted Papadopoulos' denial for a number of reasons, including believing it to be rehearsed. However, Horowitz maintained that all evidence should have been presented.
That comment in a London wine bar was what the basis really was for going forward. And I've said that I thought that was a very slender reed to get law enforcement and intelligence agencies involved in investigating the campaign of one's political opponent.
Papadopoulos made the following material false statements to the FBI, and this is what he was charged with. Papadopoulos claimed that his interactions with Joseph Massoud, who was an overseas professor and allegedly had substantial ties to the Russian government. Papadopoulos said that his interactions with Massoud happened before he became part of the Trump campaign, but it was actually like a week after. He also screwed up the dates on meetings with a female alleged Russian national as well, or something like that.
I know that the FBI said that they started a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign in July of 2016. But there's a lot of activity before that. And in April of 2016, people arranged for George Papadopoulos to meet with Joseph Mifsud. Has Joseph Mifsud worked with Western intelligence before?
I can't get into that.
I mean, I asked because we talked about that bar conversation between Papadopoulos and someone else, and you have to wonder, was that conversation organic, or was that conversation and the content of what Papadopoulos said planted on him?
Yeah, I understand, why it is important to try to determine whether there was any activity before July, before the Papadopoulos wine bar conversation. I understand that, and so people are looking at that. It's significant also that the dossier was initiated before July.
Wait, what? The dossier before July 2016? Joseph Mifsud of the London Academy of Diplomacy, originally from Malta, allegedly told Papadopoulos that he had Russian dirt on Hillary Clinton in April of 2016, a conversation that he carelessly conveyed to Australian national Alexander Downer, who then informed the FBI, so technically an FBI informant, over drinks at a bar. Oddly enough, weeks later, there were hacked emails from the DNC that were leaked through WikiLeaks. Papadopoulos pled guilty to getting the dates mixed up, and he was charged for lying to the FBI in doing so, and sentenced with 14 days in jail, as well as 12 months of supervised release, 200 hours of community service, and also fined $9,500. 2 months before the 2016 election, Papadopoulos reportedly was contacted by a University of Cambridge professor and member of Cambridge Intelligence Seminars, which was founded by the British intelligence agencies, by the name of Stefan Helper, who reportedly was a public supporter of Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Helper asked Papadopoulos to come to London to discuss international relations, and possibly Papadopoulos writing a paper on a gas field in the Mediterranean for $3,000. But once they met, Helper wanted to ask Papadopoulos about Hillary Clinton's email hack. But Papadopoulos didn't take the bait, and they didn't have much contact afterwards. Helper brought an assistant, or a woman who was posing to be his assistant, named Azra Turk, or that's who she said she was. She's actually an FBI informant. However, PDOP has tweeted that Azra Turk was clearly not FBI. He thinks she was CIA and affiliated with Turkish intel. Helper also had contacts with Carter Page, and he also pitched himself as an ambassador to China for the Trump team. It's been recently revealed that Helper was contracted by the Office of Net Assessment, including 2 that spanned the same time period as Crossfire Hurricane, which is the nickname given to the FBI's investigation into the Trump campaign. Senator Grassley has sent a letter inquiring about what Stefan Helper's relationship is with a man named Vyacheslav Trubnikov, who is a known source for Steele's dossier, which was revealed in handwritten notes by the State Department. Helper listed Trubnikov as a reference for one of his ONA contacts. Trubnikov is currently the first deputy of foreign minister of Russia. So the spy that is being paid by our tax dollars and is claiming that Trump is colluding with Russians is actually colluding with Russians. Trubnikov seems to be the missing link between Steele and Helper. Steele cited Trubnikov as one of his sources to Kathleen Kevilak at the State Department just 10 days before the write-up of the FISA warrant. On her handwritten notes, she writes the sources of Steele's dossier under the word July. The names are Surkov and Trubnikov. It would seem Trubnikov is Helper's contact. So did Helper write part of the dossier? It's possible. And if he did, was he getting paid with our tax dollars to do it? Did we also pay for the opposition research to spy on the Trump campaign? Hey, I'm just asking questions. How many other times did the FBI try to insert informants into the Trump administration? Think leaks.
It's not just about what leaked, the transcripts that leaked on General Flynn. It's also about the transcripts that Donald Trump talking to the Mexican president, talking to the Australian prime minister, those also leaked.
These close connections between the Washington Post's David Ignatius and people connected to U.S. and U.K. intelligence raise grave concerns about the deep state using media to push propaganda. In a court filing in January 2020, General Michael Flynn's counsel, Sidney Powell, highlighted how the CIA, FBI, Stefan Helper, and possibly James Baker used the unnamed and unaware Lakova and the complicit Ignatius to destroy Flynn. This James Baker is not the one who worked under James Comey at the FBI, but James Baker in the Department of Defense Office of National Assessment. Powell wrote, Stefan Helper is a known longtime operative for the CIA FBI. He was paid by the FBI, CIA, DoD through the Department of Defense Department's Office of Net Assessments in 2016. His tasks seem to have included slandering Mr. Flynn with accusations of having an affair with a young professor, a British national of Russian descent, named Svetlana Lakova. Flynn met at an official dinner at Cambridge University when he was head of DIA in 2014. Flynn has requested the records of Colonel James Baker because he was Halper's handler in the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon, and ONA Director Baker regularly lunched with Washington Post reporter David Ignatius. Baker is believed to be the person who illegally leaked the transcript of Mr. Flynn's call to Ignatius. The defense has requested the phone records of James Clapper to confirm his contacts with Washington Post reporter Ignatius, especially on January 10, 2017, when Clapper told Ignatius in words to the effect of, "Take the kill shot on Flynn." It cannot escape mention that the press has long had transcripts of the Kislyak calls that the government has denied to the defense. Wow.
We will be putting together a report that will set out for the country what evidence we have seen to date, what evidence we have seen in terms of the Russian hacking and dumping operation, what evidence we have seen in terms of the Russian social media campaign, their paid media campaign, and yes, the issue of collusion with the Trump campaign. There is significant evidence, much of it in the public domain, on the issue of collusion.
From The Intercept, Robert Mueller did not merely reject the Trump-Russia conspiracy theories, he obliterated them. Regarding one of the most cited pieces of evidence by Trump-Russia conspiracists, that Russia tried once Trump was nominated to shape his foreign policy posture towards Russia, Mueller concluded that there is simply no evidence to support it. He also found that the investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. persons knowingly or intentionally coordinated with the Russian Internet Research Agency interference operation.
I saw no direct evidence of political collusion between the campaign and the Trump campaign and the Russians.
Now clarify that point,
That's not to say there wasn't any, but I just didn't see evidence of it before I left.
Even though Robert Mueller throws all kinds of shade all over President Trump within the report, he still says, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Mueller's examination of all the so-called links between Trump campaign officials and Russia that the U.S. media has spent almost 3 years depicting as bombshell evidence of criminality met the same fate. The evidence could not and did not establish that any such links constituted coordination or conspiracy between Trump and Russia.
Their partner, very complicit, is a thing called the media. All of those journalists that received a Pulitzer Prize should be forced to give those Pulitzer Prizes back because they were all wrong. There was no, because if you saw today, more documents came out saying there was absolutely no collusion with Russia.
The House Russia Probe transcripts that Adam Schiff was trying to keep under wraps were released. Catherine Rummler really doesn't want to talk about Christopher Steele or the dossier. Well, who is Catherine Rummler? Former White House counsel for Barack Hussein Obama. Straight from the transcript of Michael Sussman of Perkins Coie, who's being represented by Catherine Rummler. Michael was asked several questions about Christopher Steele. Rummler says, as stated, I think that question calls for information protected by the attorney-client and or work product privileges. I'll instruct him not to answer. Did the conversation pertain to things that related to now called the Trump dossier? Rummler says, I think as stated, I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer. Redacted says, okay, and that privilege is being asserted by Fusion or Perkins? No, it was asserted by Perkins on behalf of its clients, the DNC and Hillary for America. The DNC and Hillary for America laundered their money through Perkins Coie to pay Fusion GPS for the dossier, and Fusion GPS paid Christopher Steele. All for dirt to spy on the Trump campaign.
And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of things happen over the next number of weeks. This is just one piece of a very dishonest puzzle.
And the Republicans look at the Trump White House and say, well, the Russians probably did help them, to whatever extent we may not yet know. So we're not going to go there. We're going to do what they tell us. Imagine, Rachel, that you had one of the Democratic nominees for 2020 on your show. Mm-hmm. And that person said, the only other adversary of ours who's anywhere near as good as the Russians is China. So why should Russia have all the fun? And since Russia is clearly backing Republicans, why don't we ask China to back us?
I hereby tonight ask China.
That's right. And not only that, China, if you're listening, why don't you get Trump's tax returns? I'm sure our media would richly reward you. Now, according to the Mueller report, that is not conspiracy because it's done right out in the open. So if after this hypothetical Democratic candidate says this on your show, within hours, all of a sudden the IRS offices are bombarded with incredibly sophisticated cyber tools looking for Trump's tax returns, and then extracts them and then passes them to whatever the new WikiLeaks happens to be, and they start being unraveled and disclosed, nothing wrong with that.
Did anyone else catch what she just did there? She thinks we're stupid. She just did exactly what she was sarcastically saying that shouldn't be done, but she thinks we're stupid. That was like code for, yeah, China, come do this. All the while knowing she paid a foreigner to get dirt on Trump to win an election. But she still lost. And now, in John Bolton's new book, POTUS is being accused of asking for election help from China. And we know that the deep state always accuses their opponents of doing exactly what they're doing themselves.
The bottom line is, I'm glad you found what you found, Mr. Horowitz. I'm not buying that the Clinton email investigation was on the up and up. And the reason I'm not buying it is because the two people intimately involved, one, the guy, the lead investigator, clearly did not want to see Donald Trump become president of the United States. Finally, do you agree with me that finding her liable criminally would be inconsistent with stopping Donald Trump? If they found Hillary Clinton was criminally liable, that paves the way for Donald Trump. Can you put those two things together?
I guess it would depend when, but yes, I could
How about
see
July,
conceivably it could.
Or the convention?
Oh, it clearly could conceivably.
Well, not only clearly conceivably, that's exactly what's happening here, folks. Mm-hmm. You cannot hold her criminally liable and stop him.
Rick Gates suddenly remembers a phone conversation that he admits he did not overhear, but he's certain that it was about WikiLeaks. He says there were two Secret Service agents in the car. The government produces neither one of them as corroborating witnesses, nor do they produce a phone record. This conversation never happened. Gates gets 45 days. For the same crimes, Manafort got 7 years for. I think we know what happened here.
The judge who sentenced Roger has been brutal. Take a look at what she's done to people.
Same judge in the Manafort case.
Well, take a look at what she did for Hillary-related things, okay? It wasn't brutal there. And Roger Stone had a jury foreman for a woman who was a disaster. How that's not declared a mistrial or more than a mistrial is incredible to anybody that sees it. He got a tremendously big sentence. You see these guys, they're burning down buildings, they're ripping down statues, they're hurting police. They don't go to jail. Nothing happens to them. They wanted to give him 9 years in jail.
Last week, when the House Intelligence Committee released Mr. Bannon's testimony, he said under oath there that he never spoke to me about WikiLeaks or Julian Assange ever on any occasion, which means he either lied to the House Intelligence Committee under oath, which is what I'm charged with, or he lied at my trial under oath. Now, if he lied to the House Intelligence Committee, then why hasn't he been charged, as I have, for lying to them? And if he lied and committed perjury at my trial, why isn't he going to be prosecuted for that? But the key phrase here is, we considered Stone our access point to WikiLeaks. Well, if that's true, I certainly didn't know about it. The few conversations I did have with him pertained to getting the woman victims of Bill Clinton out in public, out on radio,
Yes.
out on the campaign trail, because I had written the book, The Clintons' War on Women.
Yes.
And it wasn't just Bill's sexual assaults against women. More importantly, it was Hillary's efforts to silence those women.
These people were corrupt. The whole thing was corrupt, and we caught them.
Everybody is sad when their side loses an election. But the day after, we have to remember that we're actually all on one team. This is an intramural scrimmage. We're not Democrats first, we're not Republicans first. We are Americans first. We're patriots first.
Sources say Russia Probe transcripts affirm officials came up empty on collusion, Schiff in panic mode. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates hid from Congress during a November 2017 interview that she first learned about former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's calls with the Russian ambassador from then President Obama, but had confirmed it to the special counsel Robert Mueller's team 3 months earlier.
Well, somebody's lying.
Her different answers suggest that she lied or tried to obscure to members of Congress that Obama was involved and briefed on intimate details of his administration's effort to investigate and target Flynn. During her interview with the House Intelligence Committee on November 3, 2017, she was asked how she first learned about Flynn's calls with then Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. She said she learned it from the FBI, the NSD, and the Justice Department. But just 3 months earlier, on August 15, 2017, she told special counsel investigators that Obama was the one who told her about Flynn's calls with Kislyak during a White House meeting early January of the same year. Lie, Sally, lie. Susan Rice flat out lied. Her testimony in 2017 was false, as proved by the February 2018 release of her CYA letter. Congressman Schiff asked her, would Director Comey brief you on the progress of this investigation? And Miss Rice says, no, so just, I think it's important for everybody to understand we were not informed by Director Comey or the Attorney General that there was an active investigation of anybody in the Trump orbit. We would not have asked that question because in the Obama White House, we maintained scrupulously the firewall between people in the White House and contacts with justice about potential or actual criminal matters. The only communication that was sanctioned in that vein was between the White House counsel and the Justice Department or the FBI. Are you sure about that, Ms. Rice? Because you said in your memorandum that you memorialized an important national security discussion between President Obama, the FBI director, and the Deputy Attorney General. You said President Obama and his national security team were justifiably concerned about potential risks to the national security of sharing highly classified information about Russia with certain members of the Trump transition team, particularly Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. So I'm really confused. Which is it?
Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? Strzok responded, no, he's not. Well, stop it. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. That's pretty unnerving. Strzok, wasn't he the lead investigator of the Clinton email investigation?
He was, in essence, the lead investigator.
Okay, so the head guy looking at Clinton on August the 8th says we got to stop Trump. Now, was that just idle talk? A week later, here's what they say to each other. Strzok text message to Lisa Page. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Now, that's a week later. Who's Andy?
Our understanding, it was Andy McCabe, the deputy director.
So you got the deputy director meeting with the lead investigator of the Clinton email investigation and Miss Page, who's involved somehow, meeting in Andy's office discussing taking out an insurance policy to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president?
Director Comey told the House Intelligence Committee that Clapper briefed Obama on the Flynn call, and under oath, Clapper told the same committee he didn't brief Obama on the Flynn call. And they've both attacked Bill Barr for allowing Flynn to lie. Well, the FBI agents that interviewed Flynn both said that they didn't think he lied. This from Tracy Beans from Undercover DC. Perkins Coie engaged Fusion GPS to provide information to challenge the 2016 election validity. In a UK court paper, Steele's firm Orbis claims Perkins Coie engaged Fusion GPS to provide information on Russian interference in order to challenge 2016 election results. This kind of sounds like an insurance policy in the event that you die before you're 40.
The loser concedes to the winner, not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying.
Hillary Clinton is taking considerable criticism tonight for her criticism of almost everyone involved in her election loss last fall, except herself.
I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party.
What do you mean nothing?
I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong.
Money was not her campaign's problem. Clinton raised nearly $1 billion and had one of the deepest coffers in American campaign history. She failed to mention that her friend, Florida Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, had been running the DNC for several years. In fact, the Bernie Sanders campaign accused Wasserman Schultz of tilting the primary toward Clinton. The former head of the DNC's data operation pushed back, tweeting last night some choice words for Clinton. DNC data folks, today's accusations are BS, and I hope you understand the good you did despite that nonsense. The tweet has since been deleted. Quote, I'm not willing to let my people be thrown under the bus without a fight. Clinton went on to suggest that no one in the Obama administration would listen to her campaign's concerns that the Russians were interfering in the election.
I believe that what was happening to me was unprecedented, and we were scrambling. We went and told everybody we could find in the middle of the summer the Russians were messing with the election, and we were basically shooed away. Like, oh, you know, there she goes, vast right-wing conspiracy. Now it's a vast Russian conspiracy. Well, it turned out we were right.
None of this is normal, folks.
Fusion GPS official met with Russian operative before and after Trump Jr. sit-down. The co-founder of Fusion GPS, the firm behind the unverified Trump dossier, met with a Russian lawyer before and after a key meeting that she had in June 2016 with Trump Jr. at Trump Tower. The contacts shed new light on how closely tied the firm was to Russian interests at the time when it was financing research to discredit then-candidate Donald Trump. Mueller's hidden evidence. Translator exonerated Don Jr. in Trump Tower meeting. Infamous meeting did not focus on Clinton dirt, but on the Magnitsky Act. The translator's eyewitness account entirely debunks the media's narrative the FBI memos show, and he was not particularly fond of Trump Jr. He said that Donald Trump Jr. was telling the truth. The media narrative at the time was that the meeting might be a key piece of evidence of collusion between Trump campaign and Russia. Trump Jr.'s brother-in-law Jared Kushner and then Trump campaign Paul Manafort were all lured by the Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya supposedly to talk about Russian dirt on Hillary Clinton. Trump Jr.'s account, ridiculed by the media and Democrats at the time, was that the short meeting ended up being about a Russian lobbying campaign to change adoption practices under the U.S. human rights law that punished Moscow and other foreign bad actors known as the Magnitsky Act. Obama DOJ allowed Russian lawyer into the country under extraordinary circumstances. It just gets better, doesn't it? Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya originally entered the country in October 2015 on a grant of immigration parole, a rare exemption which allowed her to enter the country without a visa and remain legally until early January 2016. Well, why was she still in the country in June of 2016? Court records from a hearing that took place during the first week of January 2016 show Veselnitskaya was granted a week extension on her stay while her case was deliberated, but there were no further records related to her case. It remains unclear how she was still able to remain in the country until June 2016. 5 days after her meeting in Trump Tower, the Russian lawyer was seated in the front row of a House Foreign Affairs Committee meeting on Russian policy, so she doesn't seem too worried about her immigration status. After initially being denied a visa, she obtained an immigration parole from former Attorney General Loretta Lynch to allow her to defend her client, FisaGate, a Russian holding company on trial in New York for money laundering. During the January hearing, in which Veselnitskaya requested an extension of her immigration parole, federal prosecutors described how rare the exemption she had been granted in October really was.
These people hated Trump, and this investigation was anything but by the book.
Veteran intelligence professionals for sanity have argued based on their own investigation that the theft of the DNC emails was not a hack, but some kind of inside leak that did not involve Russia. Forensic studies of Russian hacking into the Democratic National Committee computers in 2016 revealed that on July 5, 2016, data was leaked, not hacked, by a person with physical access to DNC computers. After examining metadata from the Guccifer 2.0 July 5, 2016 intrusion into the DNC server, independent cyber investigators have concluded that an insider copied DNC data onto an external storage device. Key among the findings is that the data was copied at a speed that far exceeds any internet capability for a remote hack. Of equal importance, the forensics show that the copy was performed on the East Coast of the U.S. Thus far, mainstream media has ignored the findings of these independent studies. Big surprise. The conservative Treehouse reports a lawsuit claims Julian Assange confirmed DNC emails received from Seth Rich. Not a Russian hack. Yeah.
Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
A lawsuit filed by businessman Ed Butowski alleges WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange confirmed to Fox News analyst Ellen Ratner that the DNC-linked emails were received from Seth Rich and his brother Aaron. The details contained within the lawsuit filing are stunning. If this information is true and accurate, the DOJ claim of a Russian hack based on assertion by DNC contractor CrowdStrike would be entirely false. Additionally, the DC murder of Seth Rich would hold a far more alarming motive. CrowdStrike was the only one to examine the DNC servers, and the FBI just took their word for it. They think we're stupid. Why didn't Mueller investigate CrowdStrike? Well, one of CrowdStrike's owners and top officers is Sean Henry, Mueller's protege and his executive assistant in the FBI, who remained in contact with Mr. Mueller while in CrowdStrike. Seems to me that CrowdStrike was the FBI's, or is the FBI's, go-to company. It might also be significant to mention that the co-founder of CrowdStrike, Dmitry Alperovitch, is also a Russian-born American computer security industry executive. Just so you know.
The murder mystery surrounding a Democratic National Committee staffer who was shot on a street in Washington, D.C. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is raising questions about the killing, offering a big reward for information, and that is fueling political conspiracy theories. ABC's Lindsay Janis is here with the story. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, George. Police are still trying to solve the mysterious murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. And now, in a bizarre twist, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is implying that Rich was the victim of a politically motivated assassination. This morning, a new interview with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is reigniting conspiracy theories about the death of Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. As a 27-year-old works for the DNC, who was shot in the back, murdered.
Although Assange would not say whether Rich was a WikiLeaks source, the organization is now offering a $20,000 reward.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
Why?
It was an unprompted discussion of the 27-year-old voter outreach coordinator who was violently attacked on July 10th near his Washington, D.C. home while chatting on the phone with his girlfriend. His body was found badly beaten with multiple gunshot wounds, described by investigators as a robbery gone wrong. While D.C. police tell ABC News there is no indication that Seth Rich's death is connected to his employment at the DNC, conspiracy theorists suggest Rich may be connected to the tranche of emails leaked by Assange's group just before the Democratic convention. Rich's parents say they welcome the reward and any help catching his killer, but are strongly denying any connection between their son's brutal murder and politics or conspiracy. Writing in a statement, some are attempting to politicize this horrible tragedy, and in their attempts to do so are actually causing more harm than good.
And as Lindsay reported, so far the police say there's no evidence tying this to any conspiracy
Right, look,
theories
you
at all.
can understand, right, why people would have questions, right? 27-year-old guy shot what it seems like a robbery, but nothing is stolen. So you can understand why people are asking questions. But that's very different from jumping to the conclusion, which is, aha, this must have been a politically motivated hit.
Conspiracy, the activity of secretly planning with other people to do something bad or illegal. Theorist, someone who develops ideas about the explanation for events, or somebody who thinks for themselves. Conspiracy theorist, someone who believes in a conspiracy theory, the idea that an event or situation is the result of a secret plan made by powerful people. Now, why this automatically makes you a crazy person, I do not understand.
So look, it may end up that WikiLeaks ends up paying $20,000 to someone who provides information on this that had nothing to do with politics.
Right, and there have been
at all.
other crimes like this in the area.
Absolutely, this has been a troubled area for a little while with construction going.
Okay, people, move along. There's nothing to see here.
On Wednesday, June 24, 2020, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange was charged in a superseding indictment. New allegations assert Assange conspired with anonymous, affiliated hackers, among others. Or is this just a way to get him back to the United States?
Nobody has to be a hero. It just sometimes turns out that way.
He was an innocent man. He is a great gentleman. He was targeted by the Obama administration, and he was targeted in order to try and take down a president. And what they've done is a disgrace, and I hope a big price is going to be paid. They're scum.
Why dismiss the Flynn case? Because the FBI can't prove it. DOJ contends that any false statements by Flynn could not have been material because there was no legitimate basis to investigate or interview him. Federal law makes materiality an essential element of false statements charge. The FBI opened a counterintelligence probe of Flynn in August 2016 on the absurd ground that he might be a clandestine Russian agent. Flynn is a retired 3-star Army general and decorated combat commander who has then recently written a book identifying Russia as a committed global adversary of the United States. The FBI's then Director James Comey authorized closing the investigation in December of 2016, and then paperwork to do so was completed on January 4th, 2017, 20 days before the Flynn interview happened. Well, records now show that Strzok intervened when the FBI moved to close Flynn's case. On January 4th, 2017, the same day the case was being closed, Strzok, who interviewed Flynn in the White House later that month on January 23rd, texted a redacted individual, apparently Flynn's case agent, to ask if "you haven't closed Razor, don't do so yet." Razor is referring to Crossfire Razor, the name of the case. "Please keep it open for now," Strzok asked. He then messaged former FBI colleague Lisa Page, with whom he was having an affair, telling her that it was serendipitously good that the case was still open. Phew. Page responded. Strzok also implied that James Comey and Andrew McCabe were personally involved in the Flynn case, telling a redacted individual on January 4th that 7th floor involved, an apparent nod to the floor in the Bureau headquarters that houses senior FBI leadership. Inspector General Horowitz faulted the FBI's entire chain of command during a Senate Judicial Committee hearing on this report in December 2019, saying he was deeply concerned over the many basic and fundamental mistakes made during the investigation.
The whole idea that this is normal, folks, there's nothing here normal. I don't want you to think the FBI does this day in and day out. This is not normal.
In other new documents released, they show that at least one FBI official widely judged to be the FBI's former head of counterintelligence, Bill Priestap, questioned the basis of the Flynn interview that led to his guilty plea. Also newly released text from Strzok and Page show they were concerned about the involvement of someone named Bill, probably Priestap.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine two FBI agents ending up in the sit room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over.
The government was monitoring Sergei Kislyak and learned of General Michael Flynn's communications with him during the transition. They had recordings that showed that Flynn did nothing inappropriate. There was no grounds to reopen or continue the counterintelligence investigation or to begin a criminal investigation. DOJ never would have charged Flynn criminally with violation of the Logan Act, which is an unconstitutional prohibition against freelance diplomacy. In the DOJ's 150-year history, the Logan Act has never been charged. No one has ever been convicted for violating it. No case since 1852.
So the point is, when you made this appointment, the people named in it, there's zero evidence they were working with the Russians. Zero. And this went on for 2 years. $25 million, and people had their lives turned upside down. That General Flynn, in January the 4th, 2017, the FBI agents who had been looking at him said they recommended he be dropped, and our good old buddy Strzok said, no, the 7th floor wants to look at him. If you had known that, would you have asked more questions?
Yes.
Okay.
They were asking Flynn, essentially, did you talk about sanctions? They might be parsing the definition of what sanctions were or what constitutes a conversation about sanctions. So again, all of this would be rational if we were talking about trying to get higher up the chain of a bigger criminal conspiracy. But there wasn't one. This never led anywhere.
My recollection is that part of why this was such a media firestorm is because Mike Pence went on the Sunday shows and either lied or had bad information and said, no, there were no calls made between Flynn and Kislyak. And then this transcript comes out, and then it's like, oh my God, he was lying. And then we find out, according to the FBI, that Flynn lied to him. And so it made it seem like there was really something here that they were trying to cover up.
The transcript to the Flynn-Kislyak call came out on May 29, 2020. and we learned some very interesting bombshell information. One thing we learned was General Flynn was calling back Kislyak. After Kislyak thanks General Flynn for calling him back, they start to talk about the Middle East. Kislyak says, "We wanted to convey to you and through you to the President-elect that we had significant reservations about the idea of adopting now the principles for the Middle East that our American colleagues are pushing for. So we are not going to support it in the quartet or in the Security Council, and we have conveyed to our American colleagues. So in the spirit of full transparency, I was asked to inform you as well." Flynn says, "Okay," and Kislyak says, "So it's not something that we, Russia, are going to support." Flynn says, "Okay, that's good," and Kislyak says, "Secondly, we think it requires some additional work and everybody has to be on board." And Flynn says, "Of course, Ambassador, of course. You know it does. You know it does." And then Kislyak says, "And especially, I think, taking into account now that U.S. policy might be changing or not, we want to understand what is going to be your policy when and if we are to implement things that we are working on." And Flynn says, "Right." And Kislyak says, "So the second point, it's also on the Middle East. Our specialists on the Middle East say that they are very much interested in working with your specialists on these issues, and if you're available, not you personally, but your specialists are available, even before the..." And Flynn says, Kislyak says, "President-elect has his inauguration on the 20th for, we are perfectly available, but also something more specific. We, as you might have seen, are trying to help the peace process in Syria. And today we announced the agreement that with Turkey and others, we are able to agree on and to help the Syrian sides to start working on a political process. So we are thinking about an event in Astana, Kazakhstan." Flynn, Kislyak, "That will, I hope, help the political process to be started, and it's something that is going to be held in the third decade of January. The dates are yet to be finalized." Flynn, "Okay, so the third week of January?" "Not week. We call it decade, sir. It's third. That means from the 20th of January to maybe the end of January." Flynn, I gotcha. Kislyak, "And we are planning to invite the administration of the United States to be part of it in one way or another, because we believe that a stable settlement of the whole conflict in Syria cannot be achieved without active and constructive participation of the United States." And Flynn says, "Yeah." They go on to discuss having a meeting on a secure video line between the President-elect and Putin on the 21st after President-elect becomes president, which only sounds nefarious if you didn't get the context of what we were just talking about. And this seems to be the exchange in question. Flynn says, yeah, I understand. Okay, listen, a couple of things. Number one, what I would ask you guys to do, and make sure you convey this, okay? Do not allow this administration to box us in right now, okay? And Kislyak says, "We have conveyed it," and Flynn says, "Yeah." And then Kislyak says, "It's very, very specifically and transparently, openly." And Flynn says, "So, depending on what actions that they take over this current issue of the cyber stuff, where they're looking like they're gonna dismiss some number of Russians out of the country. I understand all that, and I understand that the information that they have and all that. But what I would ask Russia to do is if anything, because I know you have to have some sort of action to only make it reciprocal. Make it reciprocal. Don't go any further than you have to, because I don't want us to get into something that has to escalate on a tit for tat. You follow me, Ambassador? Kislyak says, I understand what you're saying, but you might appreciate the sentiments that are raging now in Moscow. General Flynn was asking Kislyak not to retaliate against the Obama administration's sanctions because the Trump administration was trying to negotiate peace in the Middle East, and they couldn't do that if we were in a war with Russia. Obama warned his successor against hiring Michael Flynn. It was November 10, 2016, just 2 days after Trump won. Trump told his aide, Hope Hicks, that he was bewildered by the president's warning. Of all the important things Obama could have discussed with him, the outgoing commander-in-chief wanted to talk about Michael Flynn. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ordered U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan to dismiss General Michael Flynn's criminal prosecution. On June 24th, in a 2-1 decision, the court granted the extraordinary writ of mandamus sought by Flynn's attorney and supported by the U.S. Justice Department after Judge Sullivan sought to overturn the Justice Department's decision to dismiss Flynn's case. Judge Sullivan was also seeking to explore charging Flynn with perjury because he sought to withdraw his former guilty plea. The DOJ had moved to dismiss the case after finding significant new evidence showing Flynn's innocence. The evidence had never been disclosed to the defense prior to Flynn's guilty plea, procured as the result of a legal terror campaign targeting Flynn and his son by special counsel Robert Mueller. Judge Sullivan is now appealing the order to dismiss the charges against Michael Flynn, so it's not over yet. Flynn's been a marked man since the moment Obama fired him as head of Defense Intelligence Agency in 2014. He just knows way too much. As the former director of Defense Intelligence Agency and the Pentagon's spy service and career intelligence officer, Flynn knows how and where to find the documentary evidence of the FBI's illegal spying operation. Obama has publicly criticized the Justice Department's decision to withdraw the case against General Michael Flynn. Why does Obama hate Flynn so much? Well, because he openly criticizes Obama's policy in the Middle East and the Iran deal. In 2014, he'd been fired as DIA head under oath in February of that year. He told the truth to the Senate committee. ISIS was not, as the president had said, a JV team. They were a serious threat to American citizens and interests, and were getting stronger. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Michael Vickers then summoned Flynn to the Pentagon and told him he was done. Flynn's warnings that extremists were regrouping and on the rise were inconvenient to an administration that didn't want to hear any bad news. Ex-Trump advisor breaks silence on Russia Probe, says Iran deal played role in false allegations. It elevates my suspicion that there is something at a higher level that was happening to stop a president, Waleed Perez says in an interview with Just News. In my view, the push against the Trump campaign and then the transition and then the administration was on behalf of those who wanted to defend the Iran deal to protect the interests of the Iran deal, claims Perez. President Obama's signature legacy legislation agreed to pay billions to Iran and ease sanctions on the country in exchange for a freeze on its nuclear weapons program. It also recognized the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt after the Arab Spring uprising led to the overthrow of Cairo's longtime ruler Hosni Mubarak. Perez says he was interviewed by FBI agents working for Mueller's probe, as well as House and Senate investigators. They wanted to know more about a September 2016 meeting between Trump and the Egyptian leader, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who ousted the Muslim Brotherhood from its brief reign in power in Cairo after a popular uprising. Perez, a counterterrorism expert who advised Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign, Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, and Republicans in Congress for years, has long been a critic of Iran for its support of terrorism as well as the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
When the candidate Trump started to say, I'm going to move out from the Iran deal, he was sending everybody a message, I want to shut down your financial interests. Well, that's not allowed. Perez said that Russia has its own interest in preserving the Iran deal, noting that Moscow sold Iran an S-300 missile defense system over the objections of the U.S. government after the sanctions were eased in 2016 by Obama. The Obama deal allowed an open market in Iran. Here we're talking trillions of dollars, so Russia and the Chinese, many interests even in the United States and in Europe, were to move in and make huge amounts of money, he said.
That was why it was Iran and his concern about the growth of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the regrowth of Al-Qaeda in Iraq that became ISIS. There was those two issues, I believe, why he was fired.
And then following
So he was fired, and then that's when he started, and then he began, you have to remember, he then began helping. I remember he came and briefed us. After he had been fired, he came in to brief us in 2015. He wasn't with Donald Trump. He was willing to help out any candidates, including Democrats, because he was a Democrat.
Right.
You know, all this is lost on people. What's happened to him is just a real shame. And then as the Trump campaign started rolling, President Trump trusted him. They brought General Flynn in to brief President Trump, who had been, a business guy, very good at building things and hotels and golf courses. And I would also say he was also good, he was a Hollywood guy, had the Apprentice show. Those were his strengths.
Right.
So he needed somebody like General Flynn who had been around, who could explain, hey, here's what's happened. So it made sense as one of the few, kind of swamp creatures to support Trump as a candidate. It made sense that he would become the national security advisor. And then I believe he was targeted because he knew where all the bodies were buried, and he knew that the Obama administration had seeded here in Washington at the highest levels of the intelligence agencies a bunch of people that he knew were not up to par.
Why did the DOJ charge General Michael Flynn with false statements, yet did not charge Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe with the same charge?
Well, again, all I can say, I don't want to discuss the details of any particular case, but criminal case, but all I can say is that we are trying to apply the same standard to everybody. And as you know, we have sought to dismiss the charges against General Flynn.
What do you make of what Judge Sullivan is doing? He's pushing back on that, obviously.
Well, as I've said, we disagree with what he's doing. We think the law is clear that it is within the discretion of the executive. It's the executive branch's function and the Attorney General's function to make charging decisions and determine whether to continue on a case. And the judge is supposed to be a neutral judge on the case, not exercise the prosecutor's function. So we're hopeful that the case will be dismissed. We think that's what the law requires.
The disclosed handwritten notes show the FBI officials discussed trying to get Flynn to lie in the interview to get him fired. What's our goal? Truth, admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired, reads the note, written by the FBI's then Director of Counterintelligence. If we get him to admit to breaking the Logan Act, give facts to DOJ and have them decide. Or if he initially lies, then we present him redacted and he admits it, document for DOJ, and let them decide how to address it. Nope, not biased at all. On June 24, 2020, more Peter Strzok notes were declassified, and they are a bombshell. Biden says that they should use the Logan Act to get Flynn. And President Obama says that they should make sure the right people are investigating. And then Director Comey acknowledges that the Flynn calls look legit. Boom.
So just to be clear, the lead FBI investigator in the case, on the day he's trying to drop the case against Flynn, takes a bunch of handwritten notes, says that even though they wanted to drop the case, Obama personally directed that the, quote, right people investigate Flynn. And that caused Jim Comey to acknowledge that Flynn's phone call appeared legit Barack Obama wanted to investigate a guy who had done absolutely nothing wrong, and the FBI complied? According to Strokes notes, it appears that Vice President Biden personally raised the idea of the Logan Act, the ridiculous, unconstitutional, fake crime that's never been prosecuted in the history of the United States, that you can't talk to foreign leaders in disputes of the United States. Totally unconstitutional.
And we can't just write it off. I think there was a lot of bias that did affect an investigation that is, to me, almost impossible to explain using any standard that I grew up with as a prosecutor or even as a defense attorney.
The DOJ now theorizes that if the Flynn interview was not connected to a properly based investigation, any alleged false statements he made could not have been material. The investigators knew the Kislyak discussions were recorded, and Flynn stressed that the agents could listen to the conversations if they wanted to know what was discussed. Flynn's statements to the investigators were equivocal. That creates significant questions about whether inaccuracies in his descriptions of the Kislyak discussions were honest failures of recollection or not lies. Flynn had hundreds of conversations with foreign counterparts. It would have been a challenge for anyone to remember the words of a conversation that happened over a month ago. FBI strategically refused to refresh Flynn's recollection by playing the recordings or showing a transcript. Agent Strzok and Agent Pienka were key participants in the FBI's decision to flout standard procedures for interviewing a member of the president's staff, which require alerting the DOJ and the White House counsel, knowing that if they had asked, they would have been denied permission to interview Flynn. It was in essence an ambush interview. But this all barely scratches the surface of all of the Flynn stuff. The FBI's 302, which is what they call the document that they record their interview, is supposed to be finished within 5 days. It was still being edited up to 17 days after the interview. The FBI refused to disclose Flynn's 302s for his defense. They eventually produced a 302, but it was from Strzok's exit interview from when he was terminated. The FBI produced not one, but two Flynn 302s later, the first labeled with deliberative and the other without, both the same except for that label. In texts, we found out that the earlier versions of the 302s, the first draft was from Agent Pienka, the second from Strzok, and the third was alterations made by Page. Note that Page was never at the interview to begin with. These versions have never been disclosed, but there were handwritten notes from both agents. Prosecutors finally conceded that they'd misrepresented to the court and the defense which agent was the author of which set of notes, and there's reason to suspect that Strzok was not being forthright. In his exit interview, he described Pienka as primarily responsible for writing the 302. We have still yet to hear from Agent Pienka, as he's been hidden from the public. As you can see, this case is quite messy. Now that you have a little bit more context to what the Obama administration might have been thinking during this time, let's look at a phone call between Kislyak and Flynn that happened on December 23rd, 2016, just 6 days before the one in question, and Kislyak called Flynn. The particular part that I'm interested in is this. Flynn says, and I think there are a few other countries that are going to abstain. Egypt. Egypt is in a place, again, the strategic goal is stability in the Middle East. That's the strategic goal. And between you and I, and this, and we know this, and and between Moscow and Washington, we will not achieve stability in the Middle East without working with each other against this radical Islamist crowd, period. And Kislyak says, yeah. Flynn says, okay, so I'm adamant about that, and I want to make sure that you know that in conversations that we have in the future, if there's a common threat that we face, Kislyak says, I agree with you. Context kind of matters, doesn't it?
As I've said before, this aspect of our strategy was moving too slowly, but the fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces,
including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
So obviously he misspoke, right? Well, you decide.
But the reality is enlisting the support of Shiite radicals like Hezbollah to kill Sunni radicals like ISIS tends to exacerbate the problem of extremism. It doesn't decrease it.
So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
To kill Sunni radicals like ISIS,
including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
We will convey our deep appreciation for the Islamic faith, which has done so much over the centuries to shape the world.
I would like to speak directly to the people and leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Their great and celebrated culture. Over many centuries, your art, your music, literature, and innovation have made the world a better and more beautiful place. We know that you are a great civilization, and your accomplishments have earned the respect of the United States and the world.
I also know civilization's debt to Islam. Islam is not part of the problem in combating violent extremism. It is an important part of promoting peace.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
Unmasking by U.S. intelligence agencies typically occurs after the United States conducts eavesdropping or other intelligence gathering aimed at foreigners or foreign agents, and the name of a U.S. citizen or entity is incidentally collected.
So with respect to unmasking, the following criteria is applied. First, for the National Security Agency, we define in writing who has the authority to unmask a U.S. person identity. That is 20 individuals in 12 different positions. I am one of the 20 in one of those 12 positions, the director. Secondly, we outline in writing what are the criteria that will be applied to a request to unmask. In a report, and again, part of our process under 702 to protect the identity of U.S. persons as part of our minimization procedures, when we think we need to reference a U.S. person in a report, we will not use a name. We will not use an identity. We say U.S. person 1, U.S. person 2, U.S. person 3. That report is then promulgated. Some of the recipients of that report will sometimes come back to us and say, I'm trying to understand what I am reading. Could you help me understand who is person 1 or who is person 2, etc.? We apply 2 criteria in response to their request. Number 1, you must make the request in writing. Number 2, the request must be made on the basis of your official duties, not the fact that you just find this report really interesting and you're just curious. It has to tangibly tie to your job. And then finally, I said too, but there's a third criterion, and that is the basis of the request must be that you need this identity to understand the intelligence you're reading. We apply those 3 criteria. We do it in writing, and one of those 20 individuals then agrees or disagrees. And if we unmask, we go back to that entity who requested it, not every individual who received the report, but that one entity who asked for us. We then provide them the U.S. identity, and we also remind them the classification of this report and the sensitivity of that identity remains in place. By revealing this U.S. person to you, we are doing it to help you understand the intelligence, not so that you can use that knowledge indiscriminately. It must remain appropriately protected.
I would say it's unusual for an outgoing administration, high-level officials to be unmasking very much in the days they're preparing to leave office. Makes you wonder what they were doing.
So as I understand, the unmasking isn't the problem per se, although in my humble opinion, it's kind of an unconstitutional practice. It's more or less the leaking to the rest of the administration and to the press. That's the biggest problem. And even though Sleepy Joe claims he didn't know anything about this unmasking of General Michael Flynn, there he is on the list for January 12th, 2017. So he definitely knew. Why lie about it if you're not doing it for nefarious purposes? There's no reason to hide it if it's just routine.
But we are pursuing leaks aggressively where we think there's a realistic possibility that we could find out who it is. So we have a lot of leak investigations underway. And if we get the evidence that's necessary, we'll prosecute them.
I think this is astonishing that Vice President Biden and really all of President Obama's inner circle individually were requesting the unmasking of a political opponent. And, you remember there was a whole to-do about trying to impeach a president, saying they were using the power of government to go after a political opponent. This is a smoking gun, if there ever was one, that Vice President Biden was using the power of government, abusing that power to go after a political opponent. General Flynn was never accused of saying anything untoward, never saying anything that was committing a crime, but they all listened to his conversation, and then they all decided, we've got to get this guy. Let's try to entrap him. Let's try to bring him in and see if we can get him either to lie, make a misstatement, or we can get him on the Logan Act. So this was a cabal. This was a conspiracy. And really, the question is, did President Obama direct it all, or did Vice President Biden?
I watched Biden yesterday. He could barely speak. He was on Good Morning America, right? And he said he didn't know anything about it. And now it just gets released right after he said that. It gets released that he was one of the unmaskers, meaning he knew everything about it. So he lied to your friend George Stephanopoulos.
So what did you know about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, and was there anything improper done?
I know nothing about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, number one. Number two, this is all about diversion.
I do want to press that. You say you didn't know anything about it, but you were reported to be at a January 5th, 2017 meeting where you and the president were briefed on the FBI's plan to question Michael Flynn over those conversations he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak.
Now, I thought you asked me whether or not I had anything to do with him being prosecuted.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was aware that they asked for an investigation, but that's all I know about it, and I don't think anything else.
Got an opportunity to meet Franklin Graham, and I told him what was going on in my life, and he said, look, you need to rededicate yourself to Christ. You need to reaffirm your belief in God, and I'm telling you, son, all of your problems will go away. God will never leave you. God will protect you. And I thought about it, and I decided to stand up with about 500 other people at his revival in Boca Raton, confess my sins, and reaffirm my belief in Jesus Christ. And 2 days later, the jurors' corruption hit the fan. And from that point on, the government's cases continued to unravel. The prosecutors went to a federal judge, and they told the judge they had evidence of treason, conspiracy against the United States. Again, the judge prohibited me from even questioning the actions of the special counsel or Schiff at trial. This was a setup, start to finish. And Adam Schiff violated the House rules. Go back and look at it. Immediately after I testified, he said, Roger Stone will be indicted for perjury. How could he know that? How could he possibly know that?
On June 27, 2020, President Trump promoted a petition in an effort to pardon Roger Stone after a judge ordered Roger to report to his upcoming prison term, which Stone dubbed a death sentence. I think this is a death sentence, Stone said. I don't think I will live to see my appeal succeed, which is why I have been forthright about praying that the president acts either with a commutation of my sentence so I may follow my appeal and win vindication, or of course a pardon. That's completely within his power, but I would call on him to do it on humanitarian grounds as an act of both mercy and justice. Roger Stone has cited that he has specific medical conditions, but hasn't identified them, although on social media postings he has said he has a history of asthma and respiratory issues. He's also 67. He even submitted a letter from his doctor expressing doubt about Stone's efforts at social distancing in prison among the coronavirus pandemic. His doctor said he requires the delay of prison sentence for urgent health reasons. Stone is court-ordered to report to the Bureau of Prisons on July 14, 2020. convicted on charges of obstruction of justice, false statements, and witness tampering. On July 10, 2020, President Trump, in an act of mercy and courage, commutes Roger Stone's sentence. His prayers were answered. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of the evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything to stand, stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Ephesians 6:10 through 18.
The DOJ and Congress have separate roles to play. DOJ, we are looking at whether or not there's been any criminal activity and investigating, and I think Congress is interested in sort of finding out what happened and disclosing it to the public. So there are different functions that are being performed. I don't think that, those are conducted to help the DOJ. We do our own investigations.
And remember this, the Russia hoax made it very hard for Russia and the United States to deal with each other. They're a very important nation. We're the most powerful nation. They're a very powerful nation. Why would we not be dealing with each other? But the Russia hoax, this absolute dishonest hoax, made it very difficult for our nation and their nation to deal.
I haven't heard any Democrats raise any upset over the fact that wiretapping of an American citizen was illegal. An FBI agent changed evidence, changed a document, a whole host of issues. So am I to believe that if we don't get the results of the John Durham investigation before the election and Donald Trump loses, we won't hear another word about this?
Well, first, I agree with you. It's been stunning that all we've gotten from the mainstream media is sort of bovine silence in the face of the complete collapse of the so-called RussiaGate scandal, which they did all they could to sensationalize and drive. And it's like not even a whoops, they just on to the next false scandal. So that has been surprising to me, that people aren't concerned about civil liberties and in the integrity of our governmental process. In terms of the future of Durham's investigation, he's pressing ahead as hard as he can, and I expect that, we will have some developments, hopefully before the end of the summer. But as I've said, his investigation will continue. It's not going to stop because of the election. What happens after the election may depend on who wins the election.
Has he been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
There has been delay because of the pandemic. Yes, there has.
An inability to interview people?
Yes. Not an inability, but a distinct slowing down of that process.
Because you can't gather a grand jury?
Well, I don't want to suggest there has been or is a grand jury, but it is a fact that there have not been grand juries in virtually all districts for a long period of time. And also people have been reluctant to travel for interviews and things like that. So it has slowed things down. But he's been working where he can on other matters that aren't affected by the pandemic.
General Flynn lost 4 years of his life.
Right.
Roger Stone's supposed to report to jail, and the jury foreperson in his case. Paul Manafort's case was dead. And many people that work for you paid how much in lawyers' fees over this lie?
So start in reverse order. Paul Manafort, they sent in a book. It looked like he got all sorts of cash. It turned out to be a fraud. what they did to that man, what they did to Paul Manafort. Roger Stone, what they've done to Roger Stone, because he knew me. He wasn't on the campaign except the very, very beginning, what they did with Roger Stone, what they did to General Flynn. And how about Papadopoulos? I didn't know Papadopoulos, but what they put him through. He turned out to be total. They had a tape of his conversation that was supposed to be, his conversation was like a perfect conversation. They also have a tape of Flynn's conversation with the Russian ambassador, which is a normal thing to do. You're going to have that position. You start calling up because you want to coordinate between countries. The FBI left. They said he did nothing wrong. They said he didn't lie. They didn't say he lied. They said he didn't lie. They persecuted him.
They threatened to put his son and go after his son.
They said to me, what was the toughest, friends of mine, what's the toughest country to deal with? Who is it? Is it China? Is it Russia? Could it be North Korea? I said, no, it's the United States of America, the toughest country to deal with, because we have Schumer and Pelosi and people that are bad people that I honestly believe don't love our country. It's a shame what they put this country through.
Notice that in their testimony for the House Intelligence Committee, under oath, they all say that we had no proof of Russian collusion, but on television they say the exact opposite, and they get paid for it.
You've been watching channel WTTC, Wading Through the Crap. If you enjoyed this video, like it, share it, and subscribe. God bless and stay safe.
Thank you.